All right, well, let me get my notes here. I have the honor to introduce our next guests, presenters. This session will focus on living and loving like Jesus in disaster relief, how each of us can faithfully respond when disasters strike our communities. We are honored to welcome two leaders who bring both expertise and pastoral insight to this important conversation. Chris Gibson serves as the Director of World Renew Disaster Response Services and is a member of Fellowship Reformed Church in Holland, Michigan. Yeah. Chris has guided countless communities in navigating recovery with compassion, resilience, and in Christ-like love. Reverend Bethany Devos serves as co-pastor alongside her husband, Corsten, at North and Southampton Reformed Church in Churchville, Pennsylvania. She also serves as vice president of the Delaware Raritan Classis, where she supports and encourages the wider church in its mission and care. Together, they will help us explore how the church can be present, can be a presence of hope and healing in the midst of crisis. Will you join me in welcoming them?
That sounds like a tall order, Chris. I don't know.
I know.
They're talking us up big.
Are we going to stand or sit? Either way, we're at about the same vertical height.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that. I appreciate it.
I never knew I was short. I grew up in upstate New York, surrounded by all kinds of people who weren't Dutch until I moved here to West Michigan.
Seriously.
My roommate was from Pella, Iowa, believe it or not.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, about 6'5". We are thrilled to be here with you today. We're going to take a few minutes to introduce ourselves. But I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't start with something from the word of the Lord. Psalm 62 begins with words I know we've all heard. My soul finds rest in God alone. My salvation comes from him, right? That's where it is. Years and years ago, on a mission trip with students from Christ Memorial Church in Holland to Alaska, I found that if you dig deeper into this psalm, there's something to really hold on to. And I hope that it's a foundation for all that Bethany and I talk about with you, and that all that we do and say here in this place and in our churches and in this world. One thing God has spoken. Two things have I heard. That you, O Lord, are strong, and that you, O God, are loving. This is the word of the Lord. That power and that love is what I hope that you hear beyond whatever stories we might tell. My name's Chris Gibson, and as I said a minute ago, I grew up in a little town in upstate New York called Richfield Springs. I can't imagine too many people in this place have heard about it. Oh, there we go. It's about 14 miles from the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, so I suspect there's more people here who know about that. There we go. I didn't grow up Dutch, as I already confessed. I didn't grow up Reformed or Christian Reformed. In fact, the church that I grew up in was a Bible church that split off of the local and like one of very few Christian Reformed churches because they said the CRC wasn't evangelical enough, okay? So my background is a little different than maybe some of you in this room, and maybe others of you can relate. I did, however, work for a Dutch dairy farmer, okay? That Dutch dairy farmer had 3 beautiful daughters. 2 of them went out here to Michigan to go to Calvin, and eventually I ended up at Calvin College. There are 2 significant events that happened in the late 80s in my life that have led to me being a part of World Renew Disaster Response Services and to be here and be part of this amazing group of people. In the summer, somewhere between my freshman and sophomore years, my parents moved from this little town of Richfield Springs to Duanesburg, New York, okay? Exactly, crossroads. I had an utter failure career-wise when my little brother got me a job at McDonald's. And after 2 weeks of working the drive-thru at McDonald's, I said, "Dear Lord, please," and this is an actual literal prayer, "give me something better." Back in the 80s, we would open up the newspaper to look for jobs, right?
A newspaper? What's a newspaper?
What's a newspaper? Thanks, Bethany. True story, I opened up the newspaper. I'd love to be able to tell you it was that day, but within 24 hours of literally praying that prayer, wanted maintenance coordinator for Christian camp in the Adirondack Mountains. Call Franz Brill at Camp Fowler, Speculator, New York. So a piece of my transformation as a Christian, as a follower of Christ, as someone who has learned the hard way many times to serve and love like Jesus and live like Jesus, was an unexpected summer of working with people. Again, I was a Calvin student from Hope College. I'd never heard anything good about Hope before that time. Central College. I need you to know that prayer is an example of God's power and his love. I truly would have been thrilled with a landscaping job. Instead, that summer has led to each and every piece of my life in ministry, career, family. So if you're praying prayers or if you're working with young people and encouraging them to pray, just know you never know how God's going to answer that prayer. It's a direct path from where I was that day in Duanesburg, begging God not to let me go back to McDonald's, to having an opportunity to come share with you about bringing help and hope into a broken and in some cases rotten world. So that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to say in introduction to myself. It has nothing to do with World Renew or disaster relief, except we all know that this network of relationships and this story that God is weaving into our lives, woven together with power and love, leads us from wherever we are now today to whatever he might have for us in our future. So I'm going to let Bethany introduce herself. I'll get to the disaster part.
I was going to say, yeah, we're already behind schedule, but that's okay. That's how we work. So I am Bethany Devos, and in West Michigan, I like to say that of the Ontario Devosses, Korstian's parents of blessed memory immigrated from the Netherlands to Canada after World War II, and he and I are currently co-pastoring together, despite the people at Western who thought, these two will never make it. 23 years later, here we are. We adopted our boys out of foster care when they were 5 and a half, and that means we are currently parents to 19-year-old young men. And so part of my perspective today is that of a mom, but also as someone who still has a consistory and a congregation in the mix when it comes to mission planning. Anybody else have a consistory, a congregation, or I'm serious, let's see. Some of you do. Yeah, okay. Yeah, because, these staff people, we love you, but sometimes you forget. But I'm here today as someone who's now led, gracious, 20 mission trips because a whole lot of people said yes. Sometimes a confident yes, sometimes I'm sure a not so confident yes, and I'm sure sometimes a begrudging yes, but they said yes because not because they believed in me, but because they believed in that power of God and what God was doing in my life. So yes, ready for this one? Come be on staff at Camp Fowler. You neurotic, over-responsible 19-year-old with way too much black and white thinking. Yes, you 22-year-old grad student with starry-eyed perfectionistic thinking. You want to restart the church's youth group? Have at it. Yes, young lady of 24 ready to take a year off of your full-time teaching job to go set the world's rights to wrongs. Let's fly you to Grand Rapids to sit down and talk about what mission you feel led to explore. Yes, white lady of 25 with no cross-cultural or paid ministry experience, come to your first full-time ministry job and mission as the staff person at the Mescalero Apache Reformed Church. You get my drift, right? Even if all you feel like you can do for mission is say yes. Where's Joe? I met him on the back of the bus. He's on the mission committee, and there he is. And he's like, I'm reaching my 80s. And I said, even if you can't go anywhere, say yes. Convince other people to say yes, or at least let's figure out how to make that happen.
Absolutely. In my role at World Renew, I have the honor of leading a team of incredible staff people. There's several of them sitting right over here at this table. I hope you'll get a chance to meet them. And an army of volunteers. Prior to coming to World Renew, I worked in 3 different churches over 28 years, mostly in youth and community ministries. Had an opportunity to experience and learn about a whole lot of things, and especially the power of getting those youth, those kids, those adult volunteers out of our normal and out actively putting what we've taught them into practice in service projects. As I was pondering the job that I might be offered here at this place, my last interview was just down the hall here in this building. World Renew Disaster Response Services and the RCA have had an incredible partnership for the last, 13, 14 years, something like that, Stephanie? Stephanie was one of my interviewers. After a career of working inside the church, I was pondering a call to work alongside the church in a very new way. World Renew Disaster Response Services exists to bring help and hope to communities that have been impacted by disasters. Help and hope. We are unapologetically Christian in our perspective, okay, that ultimately Christ is the one who brings hope into the world. But we also recognize that his people can mobilize and they can do things that shine that light. And where does the light shine brighter than in the middle of some dark place? And in the aftermath of a hurricane or a flood, wherever you happen to live, the opportunity to have God's people mobilize and bring that light is an incredible opportunity. And so DRS, the Disaster Response Service Team, that's what we're about. We want to mobilize churches. We want to work with partners on the ground. Everywhere we go, we rely on local people who live and work and worship in those communities that get hit by some terrible thing, to be the ones in charge of the recovery and to help us figure out how we can best respond. The tipping point for me when I was offered the job that I had until just recently of managing our one-week groups, the tipping point in that interview with Stephanie and members of the DRS team was this: an acknowledgement that not only does World Renew Disaster Response Services exist to go do those things for people probably mostly far, far away, but a recognition that when God's people get up out of their pews and go and do and serve and live like Jesus, they're changed, they're transformed, and then they go back to their communities. They go back to their communities and they take that experience, they take that love, that deepening faith, and they put it into practice back at home.
Yeah, Chris, when we were brainstorming, he said, well, maybe tell a story about some transformational process. And so I was thinking, and I texted him about 6:30 this morning, and I said, I think God's is asking me to tell my story because I haven't thought about those first trips in a really long time. And we often will bring to you the finished product. And we'll say, isn't this wonderful? And you'll sit there and go, How do I start? What's the first step? There was a time when I was at Mission Trip 0. I was 30 years old. I didn't have kids of my own. I'd been doing youth kind of stuff. Mescalero had been on a trip up here to Michigan one time, but I'd never led a mission trip. I was in a new church. Holy smokes, I didn't know what I was doing. So for trip number 1, I called my dad and from another state and said, can you come chaperone? Because I don't have enough adults to make this trip work. Now, my dad is not handy at all, but thankfully he was willing to come and at least be a body to help us get some painting done. Trip 2, also belovedly referred to as the puking trip. God sent me the guy who would become the fun uncle. The guy who was always up to a little bit of mischief, sometimes not telling me because plausible deniability is a good thing for a pastor to have sometimes, but he was great about side quests and being curious and asking the locals, where's the best barbecue? And if you were going to do this, where would you go? We're coming up into Indiana. We're almost to where we're going to be, which, by the way, that was the year we changed the name on the shirts with a Sharpie because it changed at the last minute.
WRC to World Renew?
No, the destination of where we were going. This might have been before you. I don't remember. Semper Gumby. Read the PDF later. You'll see it. So we're driving down the road, and all these cars had trailers, there were race cars on trailers on the back of vehicles going down the road. And Pat sits next to me and goes, I wonder where they're racing tonight. He goes, roll down your window and ask them. I'm like, what? He goes, roll down your window and ask him. So here I am, rolling down the window, yelling at the guy, where's the race? And eventually, that's how we ended up at the dirt track races in Indiana. on a mission trip. Now, thankfully, year 3, God sent me the guy who had just retired from the Army Corps of Engineers Reserves as an officer. You got that. He had all his ducks in a row, and he said, "Oh, plan for a year, execute in a week." I got it. He's working on multi-million-dollar projects at Campbell's. He's fine with our little budget. Fun Uncle is an electrical. Oh, 10 minutes, really? Oh, come on. Okay, electrical engineer, industrial engineer. God brought me all the people, and now we have a nurse, a cook. God built the team. They're a cast of characters. Go.
Cast of characters. How many of you have ever been on some kind of an active service project or mission trip? Anybody else here have characters? Anybody else here have, well, I'll say a puking story? Okay, how do you not if you do it long? Anybody else have any powerful stories of lives transformed? Anybody ever have the conversation, should I bring this person, they're not really a believer yet, and have them come along and God enters the picture and changes their lives? Yeah. I'm going to have a slide put up on the back screen here now. Here we go. Of all the pictures that I've taken since I started working for the DRS team, this is one that's special. This is a cast of characters from, I don't know where you went, Seth. There he is. There he is. Reformed Church of Highland Park, New Jersey. Hurricane Sandy, 3 years, 5,000 volunteers run through there, and about 10 years later, this group. I cannot say thank you enough to the Reformed Church in America congregations and to our college and university groups who emerged at the end of COVID, who said, we will come and we'll be vaccinated, we'll wear masks if you need us to, we want to respond. But this one shines, especially when I began to understand that the people in this picture 10 years prior were in the middle of their own disaster. And when the call came out, they responded. This lady here, her house had been flooded in the Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood in Detroit. What you probably can't see from the back of the room, there's a little porch over here on the far right of the screen. Underneath that porch in the summer of 22 was a stack of her personal belongings that had been removed from her basement, wrapped in plastic since the last time her basement flooded in 2016. This group responded, not knowing exactly what they'd be doing, and they helped empty her flooded basement again. But the story and the character I want to focus on here, at least as I remember the story, Seth, I'm going to qualify that, because Keiko didn't respond to my email, is Keiko right here. My understanding is that Keiko's first mission trip was to respond to the Schoharie flooding in upstate New York as a 9th grade girl. This is in 2022, years later. While everybody else was trying like crazy because the mission or the task was to empty this lady's basement, right? Keiko's selfless, compassionate, and gracious act of service was to sit next to this lady all day long and help her make good choices without manipulating her in what should be trash and really go and what should be treasure. She served this woman as I believe Jesus would. While I was talking with her and with the woman, somebody dropped something in the dumpster that wasn't trash. And I got the privilege of climbing into the dumpster to pull it out. I want you to know that when you go out and you see groups in action, you notice people like Keiko. Some of our volunteers in the disaster response world, they like to go and they're project focused, right? And we know those people, and some of us are those people. At DRS, it's a mix. We've got to do good work to bring help, right? We've got to fix people's houses. But the hope that we bring is when we come alongside of people. My understanding, and I wish I had the direct quote from Seth's email, is that Keiko here is now the youth pastor at that church, and not just any old youth pastor. She's a rock star. I could have told you that by watching how she interacted with this lady whose life had been messed up repeatedly, and how she compassionately and graciously interacted with her.
I know we're on the last couple minutes, but I think the last thing that I want to say, you had asked, like, why do we do this? And I told Chris, it's one of my favorite weeks of the year because I think it's when the church is at its best. The church is at its best. And we're this little traveling family of God in this little microcosm, and everybody has a role. We help everybody find a role, and we learn to appreciate all the things about all the people. Somebody has to be the one that likes to get up in the morning and put on the coffee. Somebody has to be the one who is always optimistic or reflective. And all of these parts and pieces come together. And I don't go to job sites anymore. I let people do that. And I'm running around in the background trying to make sure that everything is set and everything is good. But sometimes in the beginning, I felt really guilty about that because I'm like, no, we're here to work. But that wasn't the work that God had for me on that trip. And I totally forgot where that was going. But anyway, I know what it was. So you have to have somebody on the trip who's going to carry the light of Christ, but the light of how your priorities and perspectives play out. If you call a project by what you're doing there or by the address, I'm going to stop you. And I'm going to say, whose house is that? Right? It's about our take charge and go gunners are awesome, but we also, somebody needs to also be the one to be like, got to keep those relationships in the mix, guys. Yeah, and we're TikToking, so I'm going to
Those relationships are absolutely critical. Like to shout out Fellowship Reformed Church. Paul Vandebunny from Christ Memorial Church was out last March with a chainsaw in his hand. Harbor churches have been out. Heard about Hopewell Reformed Church yesterday. They were in Philadelphia earlier. I know there's a bunch of you. Please, if you're interested in learning more about this, we could not possibly give you what you'd need. Just know that we're here. I wanted you to hear a little bit about our heart. And then Bethany's got one more final word before we go.
Oh, yeah. So I couldn't resist. And I know that we don't have time to talk about all of the things, but I fell down a rabbit hole. And in the last week or so, I've written down everything I could think of and had time for about the last 20 years of mission trips in terms of where we landed. So it's in the PDF. So hit the QR code, you'll get there. There's also a QR code over there on the thing. And then the other night, I also was like, there's so many people that I love about these trips, and there's stories about all the things, and I don't have time to tell them all to you. So I put together a second PDF that's all pictures, our picture gallery of some of those, because they're my people, and the relationships that we've grown over the past 20 years have been incredible. Thanks. Oh, don't forget to invite them to lunch.
If you want to learn more about this, we will be glad to have lunch with you. We'll sit at a table, answer your questions. If anybody wants a grand tour of our home base, which is just 15 minutes away, know that we'll be glad to open up the doors anytime, including at 3 or 3:30 this afternoon if you don't have to rush off to catch a flight.
World Renew people, will you just wave for us over there? Hi, everybody. We'll be over there at lunchtime.
Thank you very much for your time and the extra time, Kelly.